Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited to have our friends of Scott Week here, Jim and Morag. And I am Cindy McIntosh, and this is Kelsey Deanne with Scott Week 2022. We're so excited for the coming year. Thanks for tuning in. And with that, I would love to introduce our first guest, Jim Sutherland. He's a musician, composer, music producer, artist director who has worked on projects ranging from Outlaw King, Disney's Brave, to collaborating with Scottish BAFTA Loki and the live event at Banda Europa. Jim has been very influential in folk tune compositions, has been recording on more than 100 CDs by artists all over the world, and he's had a powerful influence on the Scottish folk music world, seen from his early days with the Easy Club in the 80s, right through to the present day. His production work with the likes of Eliza, Carthy's Wayward band, Shooglenifty, I hope I said that right, Salsa Celtica and Aberfeldy is legendary. Jim, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You're very welcome. You could, and I love all these names that you stumble over. Could you just try where I come from? It's Ochtermuchty.
Ochtermuchty.
That's not bad.
I know you use different parts of the throat in pronunciation of many of these Gaelic terms, and I am not very good at it. So thank you for your patience with that.
You're welcome. We use all sorts of parts of our bodies actually for these pronunciations.
It's definitely its own language. It's beautiful. And I would like to introduce Morag McKinnon. And she is an award-winning writer and director who has made numerous short films, including Home, which won the BAFTA for Best Short and also 16 international awards. Morag has directed television, including 3 episodes of Buried, which won BAFTA for Best TV Series. She directed the feature Donkeys, which is a really fun film. I actually watched it. And it won the Scottish BAFTA for Best Film and co-directed the documentary I Am Breathing with Emma Davie, which also won the Scottish BAFTA for Best Director. And most recently, she filmed the award-winning play, The List, starring Maureen Beattie. Welcome, Morag. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here and just, talk internationally. I'm a big fan of reach, the Scottish diaspora. My family is Scottish and spread all over the world. So this suits me very well.
That's wonderful. And, we were talking before we hit record and Scots are all the world, as you say, and it's such a beautiful culture and it's from the heart, and there's so much storytelling there and music and culture. So we're so delighted to have you both here to share what you've been up to and learn more about it. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Welcome. And just to begin with, Jim and Morag, you teamed up to create the short film When Fish Begin to Crawl, which is about a relationship with nature amidst all climate change. Can you tell us a little bit more about this amazing project, how you came up with the idea and how you actually met and began working together on it? Would you like to explain, Morag, a little bit about this first, and then we'll hear from Jim?
Well, actually, it all starts with Jim, to be honest. So I might hand over, we'll segue in between, but Jim started composing a piece of music called When Fish Begin to Crawl, and it was in tribute and in reflection of his homeland. And it's an extraordinary, beautiful, evocative piece of music, which is very impressionistic. And I think I should hand over to Jim because he talks so beautifully about where it came from, and then we'll tag team.
But I'm so much less likely to say such nice things about it as you are, Morag.
Well, there you go, you've got to start.
I think Cindy came to the right person there. But, yeah, I mean, I come from Caithness, which is in the north of Scotland, right in the very north on the coast, and up near John O'Groats. Some of you might have heard of John O'Groats, which is the most northerly point, or well, it's actually the most northerly town. And the county's amazing. It's got this huge bog, this massive peat bogland called the Flow Country, which is actually a carbon sink, you know, as well, of course. It's the biggest peat bog in Europe. And as such, it captures carbon. That's one of the remarkable things about Caithness. When I was born there, and when I started writing this piece of music about Caithness, I remembered I brought back memories as a child of lying in my childhood bed listening in the storms. It was right on the coast, and I could hear the foghorns of 5 different headlands, all sounding at different times in this stormy night. And I would be listening to them and trying to hear patterns in these different calls at different pitches and different distances away and different frequencies. And it was an amazing thing. And that's what kind of got me started with this piece of music. So in a way, the music is about space, at least in the beginning, and not outer space, but space. And Caithness is vast moorland, as I say. So it's the land beyond the Highlands. I know that in the US, people tend to think of Scotland as being the Highlands, and yeah, Scotland is the Highlands, but Caithness is very flat, very bleak until you hit the coast, and then it's just the sea. And at the sea there is where several tides meet. So it's the most amazing place. Just to talk a little bit about Morag. I met Morag when we were working on her project, which was a wonderful documentary called I Am Breathing, which I'm sure Morag will talk about later on. But I really enjoyed that process, and I found the whole thing really inspiring, and I really like Morag's attitude. And there was something about that piece of work that had a sense of space and room to consider and to think, and I really liked that. And I wanted to work with somebody on my music that could help me visualize it who would get, you know, it's a wonderful collaboration that we have. I've learned such a lot about film on this and making film, and now Morag tells me that I'm a filmmaker, and which is remarkable actually, because I wasn't before we started. So together we've been making a film that relates to the music and that I scored, and so that gives us a very, you know, we both have a very personal input to this, having this kind of background together. Anyway, I'll let Morag talk a little bit now.
Well, it's true. I mean, I have to say, Jim's amazing because he really has the spirit of a filmmaker. You know, he's absolutely not afraid to try anything. He's just insatiable and enthusiastic, and he's actually editing the piece. So he's taken all his abilities with, you know, the music technology and editing that, and transposed it into film editing. So he's great at that. And the other thing that what became really obvious in the process is this is his music, and he has a sense of it like nobody else has. So in a sense, it's absolutely right that he's the editor, you know, because he's going to have to live with this creation of this film, and it's much better that he's happy with it. And actually what we found is we're both completely fascinated by the same things, and we're digging into research, and you know, we both had this sense of you know, when the pandemic hit, how changed and different the world was, and how the skies cleared and how things went quiet, and it was really profound, and we were both affected by that. So we started talking about what that meant and how that would then affect what the film was, because I think in the early days we were thinking, okay, we're going to make a film about Caithness, and it's going to have, you know, the beautiful landscape, and it's just going to be quite impressionistic about the landscape. But we thought, no, this is much more present tense. you know, that there's a journey in this. And we started to realize that we were very fortuitously introduced to Professor John Crawford, who's a soil scientist at the University of Glasgow. And we started to have a dialogue with him, and he absolutely fascinating. And we started educating ourselves, and he was educating us about the importance of soil. And that's how we came to realize that the peat bog was such an important part of this story, and something that you would normally take for granted is such a pivotal thing in our world, you know. So we started to see things in a new way. And then he introduced us to the absolutely amazing and brilliant Stuart Kaufman, who's a MacArthur Fellow and founder of the Santa Fe Institute. And he's also one of the world's leading experts on systems theory. And this started blowing our minds, you know, and we started to realize Stuart Kaufman has this equation that he has come up with in fairly recent past called the TAP equation, which basically reflects the economic and technological growth of the human race. And this equation really tells us that this is an unsustainable curve that we're on. And so we started, and we were, you know, Jim and I listening to the music, and there's this bit where the music just takes off, and it's this stormy section, which becomes very fast and frenetic and complex. And we started thinking, wow, that's the TAP equation. So we started finding these links between the science and the art that we're trying to do. So now it's becoming a narrative that we're going to impressionistically come from deep time through the development of humankind to the frenetic speed that we live at today. And then we're going to take it into the two paths that now unfold before us, because we know that there's a climate crisis going on. And we're going to have to make choices as human beings. It's kind of, you know, fundamentally, do we adapt or do we die? So we want to kind of show how we can, you know, we'll look at the outcome if we don't change and adapt, and then if we do. And it's kind of, you know, there's a narrative in it now that we've kind of, through our research and talking to these amazing, brilliant scientists, that we've developed this. And now we have this incredible project, which is, it's film, it's music, but it's also science and a beautiful dialogue between all these elements. Sorry, I just went off on one.
No, that's really good. And you know, it's great. And just to say that, so initially what we're doing is we're creating a video triptych. So it'll be on 3 screens. And it'll be something that, because of COVID, of course, this is a live performance. It's a 20-piece orchestra that performs, a small orchestra, so we do have a performance at Celtic Connections in 2023, which is a festival in Glasgow, and that performance will be this amazing installation. I say amazing installation. And with the 20-piece orchestra playing the score, and this very immersive environment, if you like, that's created for the audience. And the touring, there'll be 2 versions of the installation. One will be with this orchestra, and you know, if COVID allows, we'll be attempting to tour this with the orchestra, and we'd love to bring it over to the States, in which case we could work with an orchestra in California, for instance. Rather than bringing the whole orchestra over, we could bring principals and work with a local orchestra, which is one of the great things about the piece. It's very movable in that sense, very transportable. But also we want to be able to create a version of it that is very COVID friendly in that sense. So it'll be an installation that can be viewed by just a few people in a space, you know, so you might be able to walk into a room, kind of like the size of the room that I'm in, and be kind of immersed by the visuals and the music, which would in that case be recorded. And so it would be a video triptych. So it's a kind of an interesting project, especially for a fledgling video editor like me, to be thinking about 3 videos that work together, essentially. So yeah.
It's going, so it'll be the installation, and then it will also be a film, and the film will be woven through with interviews with you know, leading scientists on the climate change, poets and Indigenous voices. Because one of the things that, you know, in looking at systems theory, we became really aware of how interconnection was really a theme that we were drawn towards, and how that's now where so much of science is going towards. And it's actually an incredibly beautiful thing to suddenly realize, you know, yes, there's this remote part of Scotland, but actually we are all so interconnected in so many different ways, and how this, you know, this peatlands in Scotland is so pivotal for the health of the planet. And so the thing is that we're looking at Caithness as a microcosm for the larger whole. And so, you know, talking to Stuart Kaufman, this systems theorist, we understand, you know, that I suppose this systems theory is the science of the whole, which is kind of looking at, you know, as an individual, you cannot help but be affected by your environment, and also the environment affects you. So there's this whole kind of interrelationship on a really deep level, and we really want to try and, you know, use this theme to kind of create a sense of us all having a place in this beautiful whole, and really celebrating nature, so that we all feel included and we all feel part of it. So that's kind of like, you know, because obviously the things to do with the climate crisis are scary, and we need to look at antidotes to that, and how we can all feel better and safer and more connected in the world that is, you know, it's sometimes not a great place. But I think, you know, we're beginning to find ways to actually articulate this, and that's why it's just such a fantastically exciting process.
Absolutely.
And before we move on really quick, sorry, I'm interjecting, but I've been up into Caithness and I've done the 500 several times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'm visualizing being there, just listening to you talk about it again. And of course, we'll put in description down below lots of links to all of your work and to different areas. But I think it's really worth, for anyone who hasn't been in this region of Scotland, up in Sutherland and from John O'Groats, where you catch the ferry out to the Orkneys and then over to Cape Wrath, there are many videos that people have done where they've attached, you know, a camera to their car of this area. And it's well worth seeing what you're talking about, with just the terrain and the scenery is stunningly beautiful. It's like nothing else in the rest of Scotland. It's really a must do, but please look it up and see this beautiful area of Scotland with all the peat moss and the hills and the water. It's just stunningly beautiful. So sorry, I wanted to throw that out.
No, brilliant. Fantastic. Yeah, good to hear that.
No, please. I mean, we're talking about a visual experience, so that's such a great way to, you have to visually experience what Morag and Jim are talking about to really get the essence of this. So thank you.
It's kind of, it's a bit like Montana, you know, when you're, they call it Montana, am I right in thinking they call Montana the land of the big sky? Is that correct? I think
Yes.
it is. And Caithness is like that, you know, when you're standing on these big flat moors, you feel part of the sky in a way. It's the most remarkable feeling. It's so kind of expansive. It's not big in the way that Montana is big. You could definitely fit the whole of Caithness in a tiny corner of Montana, but it has that same sense of open space, which is wonderful. And of course, Montana's leads on to the Rockies in the same way that Caithness leads on to the Highlands. So there's a few parallels there, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. And I just want to circle back too. You know, we were talking about some of the antidotes and the solutions to some of the things that we're seeing. So I know we could talk about this topic for literally hours, but are there a couple of antidotes that either you personally feel or that the scientists are talking about that can practically help, that individuals can put into their daily lives to really change their perceptions and ways of being, to shift this narrative?
Gosh,
That's a very, sorry.
You go ahead, Jim. It's a great question.
I'll take the hard questions. Yeah, don't worry. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, I mean, one of the things that we are thinking one of the things that is driving this project, and actually that drives the title of the project, When Fish Begin to Crawl, is that, you know, in 400 million years ago-ish, there was Caithness was formed as a bed of a great lake. And which is why it's so flat and why the stone is so flat. And around that time, towards the end of this period, which was called the Devonian period, there was an ice age. And that ice age created conditions, excuse me, and that ice age created conditions by deoxygenating the sea and the water. It created conditions where the fish evolved to grow legs and crawl out onto the land and breathe air. And the premise of our project, in part, is if a climate event, global cooling event, such as that ice age, could cause such a catastrophic occurrence, I mean, these fish having to adapt, essentially, you know, what might global warming bring now? And I think that's you know, I think that kind of helps to cement the idea that we are in trouble. And you know, I think there are many things that we can do, and we're doing one of them right now, and that's to just talk to other people about it. I think, you know, there's a lot of guilt put on people about it, and you know, we're not all the problem, but you know, we all can be part of the solution, and I think that's really important. I've actually I can't believe that I now eat probably 70–80% of my diet is plant-based, and I'm a great meat eater. I have to say, I'll never be a vegan, but making that change incrementally is a really good thing. Is a really great way that we can all, as individuals, have some effect. You know, Morag's probably got much better.
No, I don't. It's interesting because I think the solutions maybe in some ways come from a philosophical place to some extent, because there's this interesting thing that as we've kind of gone into this, there's this, and so many of the scientists we've spoken to, they kind of end up saying one thing is that, you know, humans have seen themselves as above nature, and suddenly we kind of have to realize that we are of nature, that we are, you know, we have to live hand in hand with nature, and we have to really cherish it and appreciate it. It's like our, you know, where Scotland and America meets in the beautiful mind that is John Muir, you know, and you know, all the things that John Muir spoke about and are so important now, you know, and I think that we take a lot of inspiration from him as well, because he really understood the beauty and the necessity of the wild spaces, you know, and you know, you can, I think he said, John Muir said, going outside is going inside. And I kind of, you know what he means, kind of, it's so important to be able to commune with nature and really appreciate it. So I think it's really, and this is part of this thing, you know, interconnectedness that we're talking about, which is that, you know, so often we seem cut off from the very world that we're part of. And actually, it's such a shame, because we have so much more to gain by being really aware of nature and our environment, because then we realize that we're all part of that, and it's actually quite beautiful. And I think then therefore we would treat it with much more respect. So I just think, you know, there are philosophical, there are practical things, yeah, like eating less meat, you know, traveling less, and, you know, use a bike. It's very good. I love riding my bike. It's like,
have you got a bike?
Of course I've got a bike. So, you know, I just think, but you know, there's practical and there's philosophical, and I think sometimes philosophical leads to practical. So that's quite a beautiful thing. But I just think it's just a shame that, you know, when we don't have that connection with our beautiful land, you know, whether it's Scotland or America, that you know, that's a shame, and that's something that we can, benefit from so much.
I think that's right. If we're able to see how the natural world is connected and see how we are connected into it, and realize that in a way, that amazing quote that a butterfly flapping its wings in one hemisphere creates a hurricane in another. I totally paraphrase it, but is a very real thing, and the small things that we do can have huge effects.
I mean, if we had our professor, the wonderful Professor John Crawford here, he'd be telling you all about the importance of soil health and how certain farming practices degrade the soil, and how, basically soil is phenomenal for, if you do the right practices, for carbon sequestration. So you can input carbon into the soil, which makes it much healthier, and therefore you have healthier plants, and therefore you have healthier people. So the thing is, how we treat the soil is actually, it's all part of this cyclical thing. So that's going to be impressionistically part of our message as well.
That's amazing. And I just wanted, I think we were talking with Net Zero last year for Scott Week, and just talking about too, when you go to the grocery store, like, I am aware of anything that I purchase now, how is this going to go back into the earth and fit back into the earth? And I find myself wondering about packaging just from groceries from the grocery store. If it's wrapped 3 times in plastic with styrofoam, maybe I'm not going to buy that product. And that sounds like a simple, practical thing, but I find myself thinking more about everything that I purchase. How is this going to fit back into the earth in a way that's not going to be harmful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
A small thing like that can, if we all did it, what a difference it would make. You look at the plastic in the oceans. It's a terrible thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. And just when the pandemic hit, there was a small group of my friends that we would go swim in the ocean at sunrise, and with the dolphins would come out, and it was so, like, literally a breathtaking, magical experience. And it was great because we did it illegally. We weren't supposed to go in the ocean. The beaches were closed, but the oceans were clean. And the dolphins hadn't come for a very long time, and they started coming a lot. There was no plastic. I went swimming in the ocean in September. There's plastic in the ocean floating around. There's plastic all over the beaches. Everybody is on there. And it made me so sad, because did we not learn anything?
Exactly. I think in Scotland we've got a remarkable opportunity to produce clean energy, certainly through our hydropower and our wind power and wave power, and we're doing quite a lot towards that. But Morag and I were really very inspired by watching the ex-Prime Minister of Bhutan on a TED Talk yesterday, funnily enough. And but Bhutan is I believe the only carbon negative country in the world, and they sequester more carbon than they produce, and they're absolutely, I would recommend anybody to have a look at Bhutan as an example. They've got this really cool we talk about the gross national product. They have GNP. They have a thing there which they call GNH, which is gross national happiness, and they apparently base all of the laws and the development on this GNH, on gross national happiness. And it would be lovely if we were able to think about our lives in that way, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
We'll try and take it to the Scottish government and see what they say.
Yes.
Absolutely. And we'll move on to a little bit to segue back to your work as filmmakers. So Jim, so what was your experience like being called to music? You talked about growing up in Caithness, and what was it like growing up as a young man in Scotland and being called to music, and what drew you to music and being later as a composer and artistic director and now a filmmaker?
Well, when I was growing up, around about the age of 14, I wanted to be Rory Gallagher. He's a great guitar player, but then some years later I realized there actually already was a Rory Gallagher, and that I would never manage to do that. So I decided to be Jim Sutherland instead, which is definitely a kind of second option, but it's worked out okay. I didn't really enjoy school very much. I didn't achieve very much academically, and I think, you know, there's a lot of kids out there who are sitting you know, at school and going, no, I hate this, I'm not doing very well, and I'm not achieving, I do terrible in my exams, and actually, you know, I was that child, and I think, you know, there's a good chance I've got kind of undiagnosed ADHD or something like that, and almost certainly, and I think that a lot of kids out there like that, and I think there are other ways of thinking about life, and it's that sort of GNH thing as well, and so I kind of dropped out of an apprenticeship that I was in and went off to join the circus, as it were, with music, and that was a wonderful thing for me. I kind of learned lots, and my parents were wonderful, and they gave me lots of different instruments to play at various stages of my life. And you know, I remember my dad handing me a Greek bouzouki once, and after he heard me messing about with it for about half an hour, he said, I thought you said you could play that. And obviously it requires a little bit more time than that. But and I went on to play folk music, and that led me through a variety of different, really interesting for me situations, playing with Led Zeppelin, or at least the main guys. I was invited by Jimmy Page and Robert Plant to join them on a what was MTV Unplugged in the 90s, and gosh, that's a long time ago, and that was a remarkable experience, which led on to other remarkable experiences. And I met a guy called John Berger, who's a very he's sadly passed on now, who was an incredible influence on me. He's an art critic, art philosopher, and I worked on him on 2 films, 89 and into the early 90s, and kind of ended up from that doing a lot of television commercial type stuff, which I hated. And just as I was thinking, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, that's when the Plant and Page opportunity came along. And that sort of spurred me on, and through to the end of the 90s, when I was far too old for it, I started writing pop songs, and ended up being part of a pop band called the Lanterns, which was not really successful. I think we had a top 30 or something like that, but I loved it, and I loved writing songs. But then the music business changed, and you know how music goes. You know, we have Spotify and these companies that essentially sell people's music for next to nothing, and so you can have millions of plays and hardly buy a cup of coffee for it. But so music changed, and a lot of musicians at the time changed as well, and I was one of them, and I kind of dropped out of that commercial music world, and really started to plough my own furrow as a composer, and that was a great turning point for me. I felt like I'd kind of gathered enough experience over the years, and to just try and be myself, and you know, that's something that we would all benefit from, you know, to being ourselves, and it's the hardest thing to be sometimes.
That's truly fascinating to hear. And as a musician myself, I understand very well. I mean, you look for your instrument or instruments throughout your life, but what are you going to put? I always tell my students, what do you want to put music through? And it could be your voice, it could be an instrument that is external from your body, but you're always thinking about it, and you always want to put the music through it. And it's phenomenal that you became a songwriter and a composer, because not everyone who is a musician can do that and can hear those other instruments and have that. And so what a true talent that is. And it's wonderful to hear your work. And with that, Morag, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background. So you were born in Singapore and raised for a time in Indonesia before coming to Scotland with your mother at the age of 5. And so how was your experience in early life and then later in life? How did it influence your movie making and storytelling, and what are sort of your thoughts of how you knew, that you wanted to tell stories to the world and what those stories would be?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Yeah, so I think that starting off my life in Indonesia it had quite a big impact on me, and I think it's funny, it takes a long time to start to realize what kind of impact that does actually have on you. And I think that, I suppose I had home in Southeast Asia, and then it was uprooted, and now I have home here. But I suppose that experience of two different cultures, two different countries, which are massively different, makes me feel connected. I don't have allegiance to just one place. I feel much more connected to the globe, because I loved people who were Indonesian, and I formed very close, I had a sort of substitute grandmother who was somebody that I just adored. And it made me, it was a very strange time when I was growing up, because it was still, I suppose, there was a sort of aspect of colonialism still there. But for me, it was interesting because I didn't actually see, being a child, I didn't kind of really register the color differences or the cultural differences. I just kind of loved who I loved, and I brought that with me. And I think that, films that I made, I didn't write a few of them, but I'm really interested in telling stories of people, of quite ordinary people. It's not. I'm sort of not oriented towards sort of more glamorous stories. I'm really kind of quite moved personally by the stories of ordinary life, and seeing people on film who just look like ordinary people. And the film Home, that really, that was written by a good friend of mine. And we had a friend who was a housing officer, and he kept coming and telling us these amazing stories of the things that he had witnessed as a housing officer. And one of them was about a guy who was harboring a donkey in his flat, and it had to be taken away for health and safety reasons, but the guy was absolutely bereft because it was his best friend, and so you start to see, that people are a curious and diverse bunch. And there's this, and the concept of home is it's a fragile, beautiful thing in a way. And I think we were really interested in exploring what the concept of home means. And it doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be full of wonderful furnishing, but it's a heartfelt thing. And so, that film is full of what you might call very ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And I think a lot of people, ordinary people, are quite extraordinary. And I quite like the idea of celebrating that. So yeah, I think it's a very strange thing for me as a filmmaker, because the thing that drew me to filmmaking was, well, I went to art college first, and I started studying sculpture, because I'm fascinated with forms and structures. And that comes around again in this project with Jim, because we're constantly looking at the structures that nature creates and trying to kind of work with these beautiful structures and create meaning with them. So my sculpture thing came back. But then I hit a certain point where I started seeing incredible art house cinema like Tarkovsky, Fellini, and Bergman, and extraordinary filmmakers, and it just blew my mind. I was like, oh wow, you can do that with cinema. It's so much more. It was so rich and expansive, and I just wanted to do that. But the interesting thing about Scotland is in some ways, Scotland doesn't make terribly diverse works. Sometimes, I mean, here, what it feels like is sometimes it's just social realism that gets made, but I think what gets exported is much more the romantic kind of thing, like Outlander and, you know, and things like that, which are great. You know, it's like some people might poo-poo that, but I think it's wonderful that Scotland has that, you know, this romantic side, and it's also got the gritty side. But I think there are still more sides of Scotland to explore, and I think that's what I'm quite interested in, because I mean, as far as Jim and I are concerned, I don't think anything like this has been made before. So we're really interested in looking at Scotland in a modern way, with this lens of interconnection, and so that it's not this isolated place, but it's so that we are part of a larger world.
That's beautiful. I'm fascinated just to listen to you. Carthy?
Oh, same. And I just love this theme in our discussion and dialogue here about home and identity and ecology. I love etymology, but the root word of ecology is probably, you know, is the Greek word home. Echo means home. And I just love this, this ability to change people's perceptions of identity, and home isn't something that's static. Isn't something that's, you're going to fit in this little box. It can be, I was born in Singapore and had all these experiences, and I have all this history and this DNA and ancestry and the past, present, and future. And it comes into the spatial temporal reality of what identity and home is. And I just, that's so fascinating and so beautiful for me to listen to and experience. And shifting gears a little bit on this theme, Jim, back to you. You've done a lot of work with Scottish folklore music and the Gaelic language, and I listened to the rap song that you worked with Loki, and it just you know, it's like Train Spotting meets Outlander in that sense. You're like, what is this? So tell me more about. And then also you worked with La Banda Europa, which is bringing all these people from the world, musicians together and performing together. So there's, again, this theme of local, global, and coming together. So tell me more about that. You know, what has it been like to bring Scottish Gaelic music into this international mix and bring all these pieces together?
That's a really interesting question. Your questions are great. Can I just say that? I think it's really important to do that, to as you say, local, global, and it always comes back to local for me. And you know, here I am, you know, working on a project about the locale of Caithness in a sense, you know, but looking globally at the world through our project. And I think I think the more that we can do that, the more that we can think globally. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but thinking globally and acting locally, it's really important. But in terms of music, I just, it's not really a conscious thing. I just have this real love of culture, and I mean culture, other cultures as well as my own, and I love to see the language is remarkable as well, and you know, these kind of, you know, words that happen in one language, or little meanings that you know, in Spain, for instance, if you're not happy, I'm not happy, and they say, well, you know, it's not Thursday every day, and you know, where does that come from? And I think that's the lovely thing about language, and the Gaelic language is full of that stuff, and every language is full of that stuff, and music is like that. And so La Banda Europa is, as you mentioned, is an orchestra which I brought together. We haven't really done very much since COVID hit, unfortunately, because the musicians come from all over Europe. And you know, Europe, it's not so big in comparison to America, and America has many cultures within it. You know, you walk down the street in Los Angeles, and it's so much of a metropolis, whereas Thurso, where I come from, is not quite like that. so I suppose for me, looking for cultural connections around the world has been quite important, and also, but the idea of local is truly local, and I live in a small village, Auchtermuchty, and which is a wonderful place and very, very local. We've got one post office, we've got one hairdressers, and I don't go there, and we, you know, but it's a beautiful place. So with the Banda Europa, what was really interesting for me was these musical languages people spoke and the inflections on those musical languages, and that when you put together a bunch of people from, you know, the Caucasus, the Caucasus Mountains, with people from Turkey and people from Serbia and you know, Armenia, and put them into a room and you give them a tune that exists in all of those countries, and you realize that that piece of music has changed because of, as it's traveled. They'll all play this tune, they'll all recognize it, whether it's, you know, a tune like Amazing Grace or something, but in their version of Amazing Grace, if you like. That tune, because of the political and religious things that were going on in those countries, that piece of music changed. So in, you know, the Armenians, they ironed out all of the Arab influences, the quarter tones, the machims of Arab music, because of the religious kind of grip on the country, or the grip that religion had on that country, and you see that over and over again. You see the way that music travels with people, like the Roma, when they came out of India, the north of India, in what, I don't know, was it 9th century, and they traveled down through the north of Africa, and also the south of Europe, and they kind of came right up through Spain and right up into Britain and all through the world, really. After that, you know, they took a very long time. They took what, 600 years to make that journey to get as far as the UK from India. But along the way, they pollinated the amazing music all over everywhere they went. You get flamenco, you get these kind of whirling dervishes, you get just remarkable influences. You get the brass music of Turkey, and you hear how that changes as it goes into Serbia, you know, and so I just find all of that really amazing, and it's a bit like traveling for me, but just hearing these different musics and the remarkable ways that we are similar, but yet we are still managed to be different, and those connections are, I think, quite vital in us as humans.
And it's a completely other language, as you touched on. Music is just, and it's something that can touch the heart and the soul where sometimes words cannot. And I don't know, Kelsey may or may not have mentioned, she's a concert pianist that is,
Oh.
She is an amazing concert pianist and singer and a beautiful musician and very talented herself. And so I know she understands, just listening to her play piano, those movements, and I don't know, language of the soul. And it's just how amazing. And it's wonderful to talk about that, Kier. So Morag, just talking a little bit about your BAFTA winning short film Home. This kind of resonates with me on a weird level because I sell a lot of real estate in and around Los Angeles, and so I understand very well, you know, what people consider home and how it is such an emotional place for people. It's the heart and soul of their base camp for the world, as it were. So just wanted to talk a little bit more about that. And for all of those viewers who aren't aware, BAFTA is British American Film and Television. Is it the Academy Association? I'm not sure which. Tell us a little bit about that film, where you go in and you kind of delve into a rundown area of Scotland, and you really focused on about 3 homes. Tell us your perception of how you made that film, why you wanted to do that, and then feedback you may have received from viewers and from winning that award about how that impacted people and why you made that.
Well, I mean, it was interesting because it just came about quite naturally to begin with, and we had no idea that it would resonate so much with people. So for those that haven't seen it, it's a kind of a triptych. It's 3 short stories in 1 short film, and the first story is basically a couple of blind twins whose mother has just died. And so they think they're going to be thrown out of the home that they've been in their whole life. And so they're absolutely terrified. And the housing officer comes and basically, you know, they're trying to show off to him that they're really competent. And they say they go to a dance club and that they have to change buses twice. You know, so they're really kind of like trying to so it's these tiny little details that of kind of, it's like an everyday heroism or something, you know, where you just kind of, you feel for that tiny little moment, some sympathy for a life that you probably will never come across in your own life. So for us, it was trying to kind of get into these extraordinary lives that you would never really know otherwise, I guess. And there's another, I mean, so a friend of mine and the writers who was this housing officer, and he would just tell us extraordinary things over and over again. And it just seemed important in some way to give voice to these lives that are normally unseen. And I have to say, I think as a filmmaker, I increasingly think that is really, really important to get, you know, if you don't see yourself reflected on film, then you feel like you're not part of the world in some way. So it's really important for people from all walks of life, from all ethnicities, to see themselves reflected. And I think because this film had, you know, ordinary people doing extraordinary things, it resonated in quite a powerful way. Not that people are saying, oh, you know, but one of the stories has a man having a donkey in the house. I mean, that's quite unusual. But there's something about, you know, we all love having pets. His just happened to be a really big one. So, you know, I do think that there is something that's really important about telling stories that are normally untold. And I think that's what I'm personally quite attracted to. And when you see a gap of something that needs to be told, then it gives you more energy to want to tell it. Like even I went on and I took part in a TV series called Buried, which was set in a prison, which was pretty dark and pretty challenging. But I remember just being blown away by the scripts and the intensity and the extraordinary reality of those scripts. And I just wanted to be involved with that so much because, again, it's untold stories. And I think that, again, leads me to what I did with I Am Breathing with my good friend Emma Davie, is that came about. I mean, a lot of things came about. You know, I feel like in life, opportunities present themselves, and sometimes you've just got to tug the thread and follow it, and you've got to just follow where life goes. And this was a more challenging one because this came up because a friend of mine, I went to art school and met this lovely man called Neil Platt, and when he turned 34. He started to lose the ability of his foot, and then eventually he was diagnosed with motor neuron disease, which I think in America you call Lou Gehrig's disease. And so he basically, as his abilities diminished, he started writing a blog as a way of empowering himself. And then at one point he wrote in his blog, he said, you know, he had a 1-year-old son at that time. And he said, I just need to get the word out there about this awful disease because I don't want to get my son, I don't want my son to get it. And so he wrote, anyone you know, anything you could do. And I just thought to myself, oh, you know, you just want to help, you want to do something, because it's heartbreaking. So I went to my good friend Emma Davie, who's an amazingly gifted and talented documentary maker, and I said, I think, you know, I think this would be a really powerful thing to do, and this needs to happen. And she turned to me and said, well, I'll do it if you do it. And I was thinking, oh, well, I've only really done drama. So, and then basically that was her bottom line. So together we decided to do it. And I'm so glad that we did, because I feel that, you know, we captured Neil's last few months, and I hope and pray that we can, you know, the resilience of the human spirit in these incredibly difficult circumstances, even though what happened was ultimately tragic, something really beautiful came out of it, and it was his love for his son and his passion for his family. And, you know, that there is something that transcends that tragedy, which is the strength and the beauty of the human spirit. So, you know, that was a huge thing that I learned from that process. I mean, it's really hard to see your friend die, but it's even harder for the family, of course. But somehow coming together and helping each other and helping him communicate his message was really, really vitally important for me to do. And you know, it's just making it had a huge impact on me, and I think everybody that was involved in it.
Very powerful, and we will make sure and put information again in the descriptions down below so people can find that and watch that. What a powerful film that is. And the home as well. So everyone, please watch all of these beautiful things. We look forward to seeing more of what you will make.
Yes. And very lastly, you guys have been so generous with your time and energy. We really appreciate you both. So lastly, how can people follow you? How can we support you? How can we get on board with what you're doing?
Well, it's not too difficult, actually. We have a small Facebook group of about 1,500 people at the moment, and anybody can join it. It's a public group, and the group is called When Fish Begin to Crawl. So it's an easy one. If you search for When Fish Begin to Crawl, you'll find it on Facebook, and you'll find Morag and I in that group. We're the moderators, and you know, we administer the group, and we post on the group and comment on things and see everything that's going on. And we would love to have people from your side of the Atlantic and your coast of the continent joining the group, all coasts, and then right in the middle and the whole thing. But we'd love to have people all over the world joining. In fact, we do have people from all over the world joining. And it is a small group, and it's an interesting group. People contributing video and film that they've made on their cameras and their phones and all sorts of media, and sending us stuff. We've got a Dropbox which is on that group. So we're receiving films of global warming, of storms, of ice melting, of you know, glaciers calving, of wonderful things, bees pollinating plants, all sorts of beautiful stuff. And so we're gathering material for the film that way, and we're also talking to scientists. We've got connections with you know, cell biologists and all sorts of amazing people, and we would love to have more. And we would love to see people just come and join us, really, and be with us on this journey on a kind of wider scale. And then, of course, we are currently trying to fund the project, and that's, you know, we're working, essentially we're doing this project for, really, we're not really paying ourselves at the moment, and it's a labor of love. And although we're both used to getting paid for what we do, we're not really expecting to make money out of this. It's not a commercial project. It's much more something that we feel is very important to do. and we're very keen to connect with people. We're looking for businesses to come on board and sponsor it, and you know, it's at a fairly early stage. In a way, we haven't even we haven't even set up a website just now because we actually can't afford to pay for a website. Well, I suppose we could do that, but we're deciding where we spend the resources we have, and so we do need we do need supporters, in very simple ways, like giving us video to put into our film, or to consider that they might have shot on their smartphone. But also, we will be looking in the future to raise funds, and we'd love to see businesses and individuals getting on board with this project and seeing the value in it. So I suppose it's a very ongoing project. In fact, Kelsey, would you be interested in playing the piano on the score when we come over to California? Yes. That would be an amazing thing to do.
Yes. I would be honored. Wow. Yes.
Well, it would be a nice thing to do. It would be a lovely connection to make, I think.
Oh, her playing would bring you to tears, as it always does. She's very passionate and beautifully talented. And I love your passion, both of you. You're not only just creative people, creative minds, but you want to learn. You have the curiosity. You're learning new things. You're going and hunting down people who can teach you something new, which is what we like to try to do as well. And you're also trying to make a difference, and making this beautiful film to put it out there in the world is so important. I hope that people are going to get in touch with you, hopefully through this channel as well, and want to help and want to support you. And we would love to follow you and follow your work. I love that you have interaction on your Facebook page. That's phenomenal. We'll try not to, because we could talk here with you, I feel like, for hours, if not days, and still be learning and still just thoroughly enjoy just hearing about your passion. But I love that you are willing to interact with people and take in, people's films that they've done and their perspectives and viewpoints as well. It's such a beautiful work. And thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, thank you. It's been wonderful to hear, all about you as well. And it's just lovely to make another connection. And one of the things that we've been finding out is interconnection is our theme, but it's also our process. And you're part of that now, and that's wonderful. And we're really, really delighted to connect with you.
Thank you. And we will keep up with you. We want to revisit your project every few months, as when it's convenient and comfortable for you, just to keep everyone else in the know of what you're doing and what you need.
Well, that would be amazing. Fantastic to stay connected. Please do. Please come and join us on Facebook as well. We'd love to see you on the group, and you're obviously have a lot to contribute, and we'd lovely to see you there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The feelings are mutual. So just thank you so much for everybody that's tuned in today. And we look forward to seeing everyone virtually and in person.